I talk about leadership lessons that I learned while I was doing certain things. And one of them is when there was a suicide, we told the wife, and the first words out of her mouth was, it was his boss. It wasn't, but in her mind, it was the boss, which told me as a young kid, wow, people go home and talk about us, right? And so the leadership lesson was, I want my people to know that even if I can't get them what they want, I'm going to do everything I can to be there for them, and that they know I have their back. That's where the suicides come in. If they don't show up, if they don't at least send the people who can show up, if they cannot show up, then I think we're being negligent, and I think we're creating more problems than we have to. This is not rocket science. This is very simple, and it's just caring about your people. It's a very fundamental idea to care about your people. Wake up to me is self-awareness. Your aha moments where you look at yourself, right, and then do better. I talk about that where know thyself kind of comes up with back in the 5th century BC. You know, it's one of the maxims on the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, Greece, right? Know thyself. And then I think Socrates came in and said, add to that and just say do better, you know, and I think that was just my more modern way of looking at that. You got to know yourself to do better. You have to do critical self-assessment and peer self-assessment. You have people ask me, all right, what am I missing about myself in order to do better?
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community. And now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
Years ago, my mother used to say to me, she'd say, in this world, Elwood, you can be oh so smart or oh so pleasant. Well, for years I was smart. I recommend pleasant. Elwood Dowd. The line you just heard is from a movie that's coming up on its 75th anniversary. And the message still holds up and still rings true. The movie explores themes of acceptance, friendship, and the societal perception of mental health. What one is meant to feel while watching this film is the lightness of the story, but the darker currents do bubble up throughout, highlighting a moral to the film that I think is deliberate. This moral is about engaging the world with patience and open-heartedness, and how it can be a genuine, transformative effect on your world, the people you meet, and can define your own story. I believe that the way you live your life, the way you treat your friends, the way you treat your family, and the people in your professional life can have lasting impacts on those that are immersed in your world. And you can affect greatly or negatively infect those you encounter. Today's guest takes us on her own journey, having strong role models growing up to help mold her to who she is now and define her true why in life. Listening to her truly reminds me of what leading with a servant's heart is about. Humility, selflessness, and compassion. And I want this episode to remind others of why we serve. Not for ourselves, not for our own successes, but to pick others up. Be that hand that reaches out, but more importantly, be the trusted source that when we need support, we know who will be there to lead us and to guide us, and do it with a servant's heart. Margaret Bedolla, welcome to the stage, and welcome to Dallas.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, so listeners, this is Margaret Bedolla. She is retired DEA, and she's in Dallas teaching a leadership course, and she's friends with our new chief, Como. Do you know Danny for a while?
Not really. He was a boss in LA when I was there.
Okay. Well, he thinks a lot of you. He was talking to you before you actually got in town, but to teach the course, and he said, man, he kept going on about EAP and your involvement with the DEA, and me being in the wellness unit. He was actually going to have you take a look at what we do here in the department when he first got here, and then he realized, okay, well, they actually have some things in place that are good. So, we need to see if it passed the smell test with you. But I'm going to send you the policies, and you can kind of take a look at it. Let me know what you think.
Well, the little that I heard, I like it very much.
Yeah, well.
The anonymity is really good.
Yeah, well, I want this unit to look different 2 years from now than it does right now. We should be ever evolving. We shouldn't just create something and think that we check all the boxes and it's going to be perfect. But everything, we should always be seeking out ways to make this place better. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, getting you on here, we had to beg you earlier to do this.
This will be our greatest accomplishment.
Yes, get her to speak on this. So when we first showed up to meet her today for the first time, I think she thought we were the IRS showing up to do an audit. The way the look on her face,
a bunch of hand wringing.
Yes, and she was looking for the exit doors. So, are you ready to get into this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I want you to talk about early home life. I want the listener to get to know you, how you grew up, and what your path and journey in life.
Okay. I feel like I should say something like I'm going to start in. It started in kindergarten, but
in kindergarten.
Yeah, no. So I actually, just to speak to that, I my father was an agent. He started back in the 60s. So I grew up not knowing what he did until college. And he was sent foreign. So I lived in 3 different countries before I was 13. We had he worked at the embassy. So I got to see a lot of the world. I didn't have the privilege of living in one place my whole life and having friends that I've known my whole life. But he had a house in Maryland, and we always went back between tours, so. But I did do my high school in Maryland and college in Maryland. So.
And where was this college?
It's a state college, Towson.
Okay.
Yeah, Towson State back then.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Well, when you got into college, what was your major?
International Studies with a concentration on Latin America with a minor in Spanish.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Did it ever... So you found out your father was an agent. Mm-hmm. Did you ever think you would go that route?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
When I lived overseas, we lived in third world countries, and I saw a lot of poverty, and it affected me. When you're a little kid and you're looking out the window and you're seeing these little kids that are playing with nothing, and then I look around my room and I see a lot of toys, so anyway, it impacted me, and so I wanted to get into international development. So that's why I took international studies, and I was hoping to work for AID, which no longer exists or has been cut down quite a bit. That was my intention.
Okay,
at first,
what got you decided I'm going to go into law enforcement? I'm going to follow in Dad's footsteps.
So, to get an AID, one of the things they look for is experience, and so I went into the Peace Corps.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I worked in youth development. I was in Honduras, in the small town called La Ceiba up on the northern coast of Honduras in Central America. And my whole programs were working with kids that lived in the street, that just going to schools and developing programs like, anti-marijuana, which was it's a big thing down there. Sex education, just little charlas like that, just developing programs with small communities.
Okay. What did you get from that? I mean, you saw that and you wanted to go into a certain field because you're obviously a compassionate person. When you were doing that, I mean, I know a little bit about the Peace Corps. President Kennedy started that in the 60s. What did you get out of that personally? I mean, of helping these people?
So that's where I kind of split, like where, what did I get out of it? I definitely got more out of it than what I was able to give. Okay. I mean, systematic poverty is something that you can't do. I think the hard lessons that I learned were a lot of people, Americans that were in there for the wrong reasons. And I saw a lot of drugs, and I hated that we represented the United States in that way. So that was difficult for me, and I decided to go during college in the summers. I worked at DEA. So I at headquarters as an intern. And so I was exposed to our headquarters at that time. So even though my plan was to go down the path of getting into international development work, I was exposed to that. I was thinking about that. I was looking at cases from a kid's perspective and talking to the agents that worked in there. And that was kind of seeping into my psyche as well. And it was a worthwhile mission, right? What they did was, to me, pretty powerful. So when I compared a lot of hypocrisy that I saw in the Peace Corps, including money that was coming in that wasn't getting to the people that really needed it, it was stuck in the middle. And that bugged me, I had this decision to make, and I didn't think I was going to go into DEA, but then I realized that the mission was so important with DEA that it would actually change things. And I hoped so. And so I decided that's what I wanted to dedicate my life to, because of my exposure, and not because of my dad. Listen, when you're a kid of a law enforcement, right, your dad's never home. And he was quite often in a bad mood when he was home, right? So it wasn't smooth, but I really felt like, okay, at least the devil I knew the guys were all, they're guys. And I was like, but I know that, and I can go into that, and I can focus on what I want to do there. So I chose DEA.
What did you think that your dad did when you were growing up, when they didn't tell you he was in the DEA?
Yeah, they never talked about it, really. I didn't know what he did. I don't even think I cared. When you're a kid, you're just like, why is he gone all the time?
Exactly. He's gone, and you're moving all over the place and living in different countries. So that would be an interesting way to grow up. I grew up in the same small town that my parents still live in now, so it's completely foreign to me, but I guess if that's your reality, that's normal.
Yeah, exactly. That was my normal. And it's different because I come from a big family on my father's side, and they all grew up in the same area, and I often would go visit my cousins and be like, wow, I wonder what it's like to actually know your cousins, and not just be there for a day or two. But I knew that it was a little bit weird at times. When we lived in Panama, Noriega was the guy, right? He wasn't the president, but he was a powerful guy at the time. And, my mom had a story where they would have dinner together, and Noriega was there, and he put his hand on her knee.
Whoa.
Joe did that to me last night.
Yeah. But I'm not Noriega.
Yeah. But I remember my dad whisking us off to hide for a few days, and I didn't know why. But they were very careful who was coming up to us kids while we were playing on the beach. And they were like, get back here, get back here, get back here, whenever anybody was walking by and things like that. So I knew there was some element of weird danger in there, but I didn't really know why. I didn't know drugs or anything like that. They were very protective of us.
And they clearly shielded you from all that.
Mm-hmm. Sure, they sure did.
Well, looking back, I mean, now you have a lifetime to look back, and you're like, man, there was a lot. They were extra intentional to protect you and the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think it was a big issue in the States. I think foreign, you're a little more exposed because you're there as a diplomat. They know who you are. If you're rocking the boat, and we all know that drugs lead to corruption and all of that, if you're rocking the boat, then you're more exposed than, and I think a lot about that. There's a story of an agent, and I won't say his name because he never wanted this to be public, but when I was assigned to Bangkok, Thailand, and while I was there was a contractor that was there that worked on this investigation, but it was in 1980 in Chiang Mai. His wife and child were kidnapped while he was at work in Chiang Mai, Thailand, in the northern part. And the guy was he was on yaba, which is like methamphetamine. They're like little pills that they take to stay awake, and he was pretty jacked up. And this investigator, former retired agent, had shown me a whole bunch of a book of photographs that the Bangkok Post had taken of the whole incident of when the agent arrived and witnessed, tried to negotiate with the driver to get his little daughter out. And you see these pictures of him taking his daughter and turning around and handing him to somebody, and then turning around, and the photos. This is like a series of photos, and then you see him putting his hands behind his back and crouching down, and you see her hand come out. He shot her in the head, and it was just like, that's a story that not a lot of people know. And it's the risk that families take when they go overseas. You are exposed, and there was no doubt. It wasn't just a accidental, So
yeah, it was a straight up execution, and you talk about, drugs, and anytime there's drugs involved, there's corruption. But anytime there's money involved, anything of value, there's corruption, and you see that with. You mentioned with the Peace Corps, like all the money that was supposed to go here, it was not necessarily going to what it was intended for, or a certain percentage was not going to actually help what it was intended to help. And
I hate to say that because I don't want to take away. There's a lot of relationships that are built that help.
For sure, and the mission is important, but I think we see that in everything. Right?
Yeah.
Everything.
There's a level of corruption in everything.
And there's like I said, anytime there's anything of value involved, there's always the possibility for some kind of corruption, or and that's in the nonprofit world. The Assist Officer Foundation is a nonprofit, and anytime there's a 501c3, there is a site out there that you can actually check. It's almost like a credit rating for nonprofits. It's GuideStar, and you can kind of get on there. And I'm happy to say we're gold rated, but it's that is important whenever you want to give money or you want to do something to help a cause. You really should do some research into to the actual where you're giving it, because there's a chance that you may not know where it's going. So
yeah.
So what year did you get into the DEA?
92.
92. Okay. Wow. That was the kind of the rise of the gangs, and
I was only 12 years old, by the way.
You were only 12 years old. Okay. All right.
Kidding.
Yeah, they recruit young there.
Yeah, 1992.
1992. So what was that like? What was that like getting into the academy? Well, how long, first off, I want to know how long was the academy? If you could talk about it.
Yeah, so back then it was 14. I don't know what it is now. I've been retired for 6 years. So I know at one point it was 16 weeks. Back then it was 14 weeks. And the DEA Academy had not been created yet. So it was at the FBI Academy. So we coexisted at the FBI Academy.
Quantico?
In Quantico, yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So 14 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And when you got in, did like the people that you were the instructors, did they know your father?
No.
No. So it's so large, such a large agency.
Yeah, and he had been retired for quite a while.
Okay.
Yeah, he retired in the 80s, so it wasn't, his name wasn't really known.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you got out there, when you graduated, can you talk about some of the assignments when you first...
After the academy?
Yeah, after the academy.
Okay. I was assigned, so I hired out of Washington, D.C., and then I went to Los Angeles. I was there for about 8 years. I was in L.A., and then I was in Santa Ana, which is now called Orange County. But it was the Santa Ana office back then, so I did 3 years there, and then the rest. My first assignment was actually on the Kiki Camarena investigation, which...
Please tell us.
So Kiki Camarena is the agent in Guadalajara, Mexico, who was tortured and murdered for 3 days. I came in at the back end. There were far more experienced, fantastic agents that worked on that investigation and brought multiple people back to the States to be tried. And I came in as a young punk, right? A little kid that just got out of the Peace Corps, and survived the academy. But I was a Spanish speaker, so they needed me on there. And so I was part of the trials. So the one that stood out for me was Dr. Machane, the one who kept Kiki Camarena alive. And with lidocaine, they would shoot him up so that he stayed awake during this torture.
Oh, man.
And then he was the one that actually got let go, and he returned to Mexico, which was just devastating. But I was very much on the outside of the actual investigation. I managed the informants for several years after, but yeah, that was my first experience with DEA, which was awesome.
That's intense.
Yeah.
Well, so you were talking about that, and I do remember that, but also that show Narcos on Netflix. I believe that one of the seasons this was a part of that show. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
I couldn't watch it. I can't watch
I bet
those.
you can, I understand that. Yeah. But yeah, I believe one season of the Narcos was about this case. Yeah. And you going straight to LA, I mean, that's a huge hub for all kinds of crimes and gangs and drugs. Mm-hmm. So let me I'm going to ask you this about the DEA. So what are like as far as our country goes, where people go, like, what is looked at as like the top spot for action? I would imagine LA's got to be at the top.
It all depends on who you talk to. It's probably not unlike Dallas, where you say my station is better than your station, right? So
my podcast is better than your podcast.
Yeah, right. So you're going to always hear like the biggest are like Houston and or New York, of course, New York.
Yeah.
And then you've got Miami, and then you've got LA. So honestly,
it's beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I guess.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's perfect. Yep.
So
does it kind of centralize around the ports being on the ocean?
Well, no. Yes, but you also have border towns, right? And so you have multiple. It doesn't matter
right?
Where there's people, there's drugs. And
crossing land and coming in from the water, they're two completely different animals of what you're trying to combat there, though. So they would be. That'd be pretty interesting.
But the good businessman will do both.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And eventually in my career, and I guess we'll get there at some point. So I'll go.
No. I'm enjoying it. So I want to ask you this because I know how it is, and I could just speak on Dallas and as far as Texas goes. As far as at that time, well, crack cocaine was on the rise, obviously, and especially in LA. So geographically, are there parts of our country that were more meth, more crack, more heroin? Was that how looked? LA kind of had everything.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what I personally was involved with, because we had different types of focuses, right? Some groups, we had a MET team, the mobile enforcement team at the time. That was the current thing that Congress wanted, and they did a lot of street stuff. So there, I'm sure they got a hodgepodge of stuff, right? I was working, when I was in the LA proper, I was working the Kiki Camarena case, and then I took a case with LAPD narcotics major, which was funny because as like a 24-year-old kid, these guys have been on the job forever. They're looking at me like, we wanted a Fed and we got you.
Wow. Hey
man, I worked my butt off. We got a lot of dope, and I was able to get them deputized. We went to New York, we went to Houston, we seized some more dope. I lost 15 pounds too, which was fantastic, but we made it happen. So, and that was coke, right? But
you lost 15 pounds from doing coke?
That's what you're saying. I've heard about that.
Yeah,
it is.
I've heard it works.
It helps. Yeah. And then in Santa Ana, though, you had everything from meth to coke. Everything's there. I don't know much about trends now, so.
No, that makes sense. It's all over.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, everybody has their favorite drug.
But that was the rise of the gangs, though, in L.A. And we've talked about Rampart and this that ugliness of side of law enforcement. But when you got in there, what did you gravitate to and really pick up? Like, I really enjoy doing this part. I don't like doing this part.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a great question, because
thank you.
When I look at my life and I see where the trajectory of my career, where it went, what I was most natural at were the long-term heavy-duty conspiracy cases that were more historical in nature. So when I was in Santa Ana, we did a Title III or a wire. We started wire cases, and that went to Chicago, Columbia, that sort of thing. Actually, even with the narcotics guys, the LAPD, when I was in the Kiki Camarena group, it was called Operation Landa back then, and that's what I worked on. So I liked taking it all the way to the source. A lot of people like the tactical fun of just
low hanging
buy
fruit,
bust,
knocking down targets.
Yeah, and there's a purpose for that for sure, right? But for me and my skill set and where I was going, I pushed it farther, and eventually I wound up in a group in Virginia at our Special Operations Division, which has a different name now. Back then it was called 959. And I worked on historical conspiracies, and I got to travel the world looking at. I've been in more jails internationally than I would ever. You wouldn't believe, like a castle in Spain and Malaysia. I was like just sitting in these I'm like, look at my life, man. I go to jails around the world collecting.
Not a lot of tourist attractions there. No. Yeah.
Do you like to write?
Not really.
Okay.
I like to read.
Oh, I could see you being an author or writing fiction.
You've got to have crazy stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I listen. I've just listened to your podcast. I'm like, those are crazy stories.
Yeah, but they're
sad.
And a lot of them are centered around Dallas, Texas, but you're going all over Malaysia and
oh yeah,
Spain. Yeah, that's interesting.
I've been really lucky in the way it kind of worked for me. I was lucky to get into that group. It was, I did that for 7 years. After Bangkok, I was in Bangkok after LA, and Bangkok, I was there for 4 years, and we worked on a really interesting case there. We were able to indict a group of people out of Eastern District in New York. So I was traveling a lot back and forth, and then I was in the 959 group for 7 years, and then down to Buenos Aires, Argentina, for 3 years, where I got my dog. Nico.
We know you love the dog.
I do. He's still around, thank God.
And then a rabbit that just went by.
Yeah, a little fellow over there. He's so cute.
So you say you kind of got lucky, but it sounds like you did a lot of hard work to get to these spots. And you did.
Starting at 24.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you figured out you had a knack and a desire to dig deeper, to look at the bigger spider web it out as opposed to the low hanging fruit which is necessary, as you said. Mm-hmm. But how long did it take for you to get that mindset to I want to push this as far as I can push it?
Fairly, I think I always kind of had that, it's not like I went into a task force right away. I went into Kiki Camarena case, right? You go in there and you realize
okay, so you get into that case. As far as the agency looked at it, that had to be one of the most ultimate downers, and anger that was agency wide, and that probably, we have a lot of major incidents that happen in cities like Dallas that makes people question whether they want to continue this career, and I would imagine that case may have had some of that. Do you remember back as far as as an agency? Can you talk about that?
Well, I can, but there's so
however you can, yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's out there the side that I grew to know, and it's denied by a lot of people. But there is some pretty heavy. My experience was talking to these informants that CIA was behind the picking up of Kiki Camarena. That's the part that shook me to my core. And it's out there. People have denied it. There's been retribution about it, et cetera, and so forth. But in my heart, I believe there was a much bigger thing. If you think about it, do you remember Barry Seal? I think it was Tom Cruise who made them.
Yeah, he was the CIA that was hauling.
Right, and so it was all during the Contras, right? Right, and moving coke and that sort of thing. So it was kind of and I liked Reagan, so I do believe he didn't know what was going on, but I do believe that
Right.
there was a message like, we're not going to have any more communism in this country. And so there's a story that I learned in talking directly with the informants, and there is a show on TV. My old boss, Hector Breas, is in it. It's called The Last Narc. It's on Netflix. And those people that are testifying or talking in there, I mean, it's drama, you know, how they do those shows, but I talked to them, and anyway, so that's the part that killed me, was the story that I learned from that was that Rafael Caro Quintero, who was the one who ordered the pickup of Kiki Camarena, actually was getting money to use part of his land for training the Contras. And Kiki Camarena was picked up because he found that out, and he went to the embassy down in Mexico City to ask about it. And then he was picked up shortly after. And it, you know, so that's the part that disturbed me.
Well, I'm listening to you and I'm reading you. It still disturbs you.
Well, no, what disturbs me is the controversy around it.
Right.
Like, because nobody, I mean, but the CIA had held on to these tapes of his torture. Well, how did they get it?
Right.
Right. And I mean, it's just, and I traveled with our ASACs trying to find, like, whenever they would find a tape to hear what happened and things like that. So the controversy around it and the denial and around it, et cetera, and so forth is very real. But I know what I personally experienced with the informants, and I know what they said, and I saw their eyes, I saw them cry about it, you know, and I know my truth. That's what disturbed me, because that could have easily been my dad. And I was like, how could I work for a government that, I mean, I feel that feels weird to even talk about it, you know, because there's usually something in my circles, but it's out there because there's a show about it, you know.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, and no, I could tell that it's still. I mean, it's still. We talk about. We're going to get into trauma in the law enforcement world.
Yeah, that's what.
That is.
That's what you're here for. But
Yeah.
yeah, this is
Well,
too
I
fascinating.
think we're right there. Like, how did that affect you, and did that steer you towards the employee assistance program that you got into?
No, that just affected me, and that I thought I was going to quit
Yeah.
and find some other mission to focus
So
my
is
life
that the
on.
first time you've said that in a public setting?
This is the first time I've ever been on a podcast.
Yeah, but I mean, have you openly said this?
Just to colleagues. We've
Yeah,
talked
so
about
not in
it.
a public setting.
No.
Nobody listens to us anyway.
Well, thank you for putting it out there.
Yeah, no,
No, I've actually I want to watch this show, and I watched the one with Barry Seal. That was did you watch that?
I did.
Yeah. Well, you know, I will say this though, it was very inaccurate, because Barry Seal is not handsome like Tom Cruise, not even a little. But I like the movie too. But yeah, I want to check out this The Last Narc. No, thank you for sharing that case. You know, the reason Chief Como wanted me to talk to you, because I'm in the wellness unit, and we want to go down the road of what you do now and kind of build up to where you end up taking your career. That what you just told us, you have every right to, and I could see anybody losing faith in what you're fighting for, and you could easily, the mission of which everything that the mission, and if you feel that something like that was done, you could lose faith in everything, and that's understandable. But I asked that because I wanted to really know, like, when that happened and how horrific that was for an agency. I mean, I would imagine that there's things that happen here locally that rocked our department to the core. And made people just want to question their why, and why do they do what they do. And some people, I think, still today, from things that happen around here, maybe still question that. And who are they fighting for? What are they fighting for? It's interesting. So I think everything we're going to talk about here is small little building blocks of you that built up to what you do now and your new why. Mm-hmm. You may not realize it, but I think that's what I'm hearing. Everything we're going through your whole life. And, you know, you seem like you're very uncomfortable talking about your whole life, but thank you for doing it. But it also is pieces of you that were put together to get to where you're at now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I want to ask you this, to get into this about mental health and the DEA. What was the culture like there at that point as far as how did you address it? I mean, I could tell you from a local law enforcement, but how was it looked at in your agency?
So in the 1970s, DEA had a brilliant clinician who worked at the EAP, and she created a program in the 1970s, which I think is very forward-thinking.
Well, the DEA was created then, right?
Yeah, 1973.
Yeah.
So I actually don't know when she came on, but I know it was in the 70s. And she started, it's called the Trauma Team there. I think you have one as well that's peer. And so her concept was to create a team and train a team of agents to be peer support during critical incidents or life events that were difficult for employees. And her program started, I don't know when it really took off, but my involvement didn't get in until 1995 when I was on the task force in Santa Ana. And it was peer selection at the time. And I just remember hearing two agents behind me saying, the memo or the cable had come out, let's identify some people for this program, right? And I remember these two guys behind me saying, well, I think I'd want Margaret to tell my wife if I was killed. And I sat up straight and I was like, is that a compliment or is that a curse?
Could be both.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely is, because it means that I was identified as somebody that had something that they felt comfortable with me, with their family. And so that sent me on a ride that took me all the way to the very end of my career. And I was in trauma, and I honestly look at the trauma team as one of the most, the reward doesn't sound right, rewarding, right? It's probably made the biggest impact on me as a person. And all the things that I've dealt with over the years in that position. I'm grateful that I had those roles at the times that it was needed. And, there's a maturation when you start doing it when you're like 25, 26 years old, all the way to, the age where I retired, and your confidence as it grows. And that goes into the leadership aspect that kind of probably brought me here today, at least part of it, and leadership response to trauma. So I was a different person in the trauma team at the beginning, but towards the end, I was a bold, strong woman, and I was like, made sure that things were done the way I felt and my experience brought me to. So, that's how I got into it.
What I'm hearing, though, what I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong or if you think differently, it was when you're selecting these people, it is a unique skill set to have empathy, compassion, and support, especially in the first responder world, because of the things we see and the people we encounter, and
just the volume,
just the volume. And I'm a big believer in having the right messenger, because what we see from the police department, most models our peer support models are, okay, who wants to do it? Volunteers. People raise their hand. Okay, you. We train you in a few classes, and then you sit on the sidelines and you wait. And if somebody's in crisis, then they can come to you. But I believe that in a lot of the cases that the selection of these individuals are not really vetted as they should be, or they don't have the right people. Because somebody volunteers doesn't mean they actually are worthy of that role. And when you have people speaking on your behalf, saying that they would like to have Margaret handle it, that I said this before, your reputation isn't what you think of yourself, it's what others think of you. And I think it's very important when you're picking this role, to be a peer in a peer-to-peer situation, that you have to have the right people. Otherwise, the message is not going to be, it's going to be lost.
100%. And also, it can discredit your program. If you have the wrong person handling a family or a situation that can't handle it in a way that they should or could, then they'll be like that. I mean, there was an incident in LA, because I ended in LA in my career, and
Full circle.
And when I was there, we had a critical incident, and there was a lot of cynicism, which happens in law enforcement, especially with the peer program. And and I was told, I remember a supervisor saying, I wasn't a believer in the trauma team, but I am now. And that's a compliment. That means we did it right, that I selected the people right, or that I had them respond in a way that I was happy with, you know. And you said something about coming to you, right? The way that Ms. Connors had set this up for DEA is we respond to the incident. So the same time there's a shooting, a suicide, a death in a family, a car accident, or whatever the case may be, we go there. We show up on the scene at the time that the bosses come out, that anybody comes out, right? So that is I don't know, maybe that's different. It's not coming to you, it's us going to them, and just kind of
It's proactively.
It's proactive.
Yes.
And yes, exactly. It's not reactive. We go out, we remove them from the scene, we get the blood off of their body, we put them in the gym clothes that we have in the back seat, right? We try to get that trauma minimized as much as possible, right? So,
and that was her original model from the 70s. Is that what, or I'm sure that wasn't everything built on what she started,
yeah.
But that is something she created and just was built on over years and experiences. This works. This does not work.
Right.
Right.
I would think so. Yeah. And the people that followed her, Elise Sharp, you know, everybody that's followed her has continued this because they see how effective it is. I mean, a lot of stuff happens, right, internationally, nationally, and it's when the messaging is important too, and maybe we'll get to that, but, you know, making sure that people see that this is a good program, and a lot of leaders, people that started, you know, at a lower, start, and they're doing it as they go up in the agency, they had that background, right? So they know how important it is, and EAP is pretty good at marketing it. So when I got to LA, not a lot of people had heard of the trauma team, because that boss at the time wasn't a believer, or maybe just dismissed it. And I said, "What? That's BS. Let's get all the trauma team." I met with them. I asked them what they were good at. Like, you may not be good at with the children of a deceased person, right? You may prefer to go and get the dry cleaning and go pick up family members from the airport as they come in, right? I wanted to see what strength all my trauma team people in LA had. They'd never all met in the same room, you know, so I put them in the same room. We went around, what are you good at? I want to make sure I send, you know, now look, LA is probably like Dallas, right? It's huge geographically, so I wanted to have their name, and I made a little laminated card with their names, and then we had a thing with the SAC on down, where when a critical incident happened, I would be called, I would look on the map, see who was closest, and deploy them. But if you're not good at certain things, or you felt uncomfortable, or it triggered old trauma responses that you went to, I wanted to make sure that we got the right people at the right place. We had one incident where everything went bad. I sent 2 guys that were really big into tactical stuff out to one location that something had happened, and they actually wound up getting involved in the whole thing. You know, they went live, I guess. I don't know. I was at the hospital, but they were able to get involved and provide support. But that's not their purpose. But it was cool that I sent them instead of me going to that, because, you know, having been foreign for 15 years, pretty much, I really didn't wear my vest very often, you know. So I went and dealt with the injured. So anyway, you know, find your strengths with your trauma team and send them to the right place so you can get be the best service.
Right, and you were over that.
I kind of took it under my thing.
Yeah.
That wasn't. I think every division in DEA has somebody that the leader or the bosses would call, because they know that they'll react well, and I know that, you know. But because it seemed to lag, you know, I hadn't been in LA for 15 years. All the leaders and EAP created a half-hour video of trauma team responses, with the last one and the most recent death overseas, Terry Watts, who was murdered in a taxi, who was stabbed to death, and you get the family talking about the trauma team response and how they felt, you know, cared about and seen and never alone during their worst days, right, at the worst moments. And so yeah, I think everybody has their own way of doing it, but this is what I did when I came. I just took the bull by the horns and said, I'd like to do this. The SAC said, go ahead, do it. I did it. I got us all together. And luckily we had that, because we then had 3 critical incidents in a row, and I was able to deploy everybody as soon as possible.
About how many years into your career is this?
Which one? The LA one?
Yeah,
the last one.
Yeah, when you're kind of taking over in that SAC
for
segment.
For the division. That was towards the end of my career.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be the end of my career, but
Sure.
yeah, it was towards the end of my career. I was a supervisor.
When you talk about you said a lot of things that made me smile, because you said there's a suicide, there's a fatality accident, or there's a homicide. So what we have in Dallas is we try to take a proactive approach as opposed to reactive. We actually have a network of informal leaders that we handpick through the department, not because they think they're good or they volunteered because they wanted to be a part of something that they maybe shouldn't have, that we handpicked them, and they're all across the department. Doesn't matter rank. And anytime our unit gets, anytime there's a homicide, a suicide, a child offense, or a fatality accident, or any other kind of weird, extreme incident that happens that could potentially affect officers, we actually do the research, and we say, okay, well, these 10 and 12 officers responded, these 2 officers responded. We reach out to them and say, hey, we saw you answered this homicide call. Are you okay? It just starts a little conversation, and then Kent does it. I mean, you have a conversation with these folks, and a lot of them are like, I'm fine. No, I'm good. Thanks for doing it. And they appreciate it. It makes them feel like you care. Sometimes I have people say, no, I'm fine. No, that didn't bother me. Well, save my number, and if you need anything, get back with me. It may take weeks, months. One guy reached out a year later. Hey, we talked a while back. I'm going through a divorce, or my kid is cutting. We had just kind of planted a seed that they have a place to go to, and that's what we do here, and we're still trying to build on it.
Mm-hmm. I think that peer accessibility is so important when they know that you're a safe person to go to, because people are intimidated by going to formal clinicians or to therapists. They don't like that word, but when you're talking to a buddy that may have been through it, who understands your world, it's so much easier, and it gets them talking, which is so much of the healing process, right? Is to get them to talk. And we had a shooting incident where a young female agent had a shooting, and I met her at the hospital, and all the guys were around her, kind of, guiding her, and she was just sitting there super stiff. And I said, come here. And I took her to my car, and I sat her in the car. I said, go ahead. And she just let go and started crying, right? Because she knew that I was a safe place to be, where the guys were just, doing their thing. And it was just, no, she needed space. She needed to think. And all she kept thinking is, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my job, But I think having that peer that they know is trained, and being available, and knowing that that's a safe space, that's the beginning, right, for them, because they'll carry stuff forever.
Yeah, and it's cumulative trauma. It stacks up, and before long, I mean, it may take years, decades in your career. You finally break down, and it's something that could have happened when you were either a child or you're a rookie,
That's right,
or a year late or a year ago.
Yep.
Yeah, getting the right person to do it, though, and honestly, in this, I could speak from policing law enforcement from big cities. Academia, we really get turned off. If somebody comes in, Rick from HR coming in, academia has a place, but if you try to insert it and be the gatekeeper of all knowledge, and that kind of turns off the law enforcement profession. And I think a lot of people, they rely on that too much. It serves a purpose. It has a place. ATO has a network of counselors that are all trauma trained, EMDR, ART, CPT. So we have all these different specialties. We have some counselors that are specialized in children, which are just, it's more of that's a unique skill set in itself, dealing with a child.
Sure.
So yes, you need to have that trusted person or source that actually you could say, oh, they've been through a fire. They're not somebody who just read about it in a book or a class. They've actually done it. It's important.
It is. But I also think it's equally important to recognize your limits as a trauma team member or as a peer person, because there is vicarious trauma that goes on to us, right? We are empathetic people.
You absorb like a sponge.
That's right. And one of the things that I often preach to people on this is that you as a leader, for your bosses that have trauma team members or peer support, need to take care of those people as well, because it affects them too. You're going to lose sleep too, because you feel what that other person's going through, right? So yes, it's important but I also think we need to take care of our people. I have debriefings with my people after the LA stuff, and there were tears. I mean, it's hard. It's really, they're going through stuff too, so, I was in the Peace Corps. I'm a hugger. I'm like, come here, bring it in. Let's talk about this,
Well, we got a lot of people that they're huggers, and we have a lot of people that bottle it up, and we have a lot of people that cope with it in different, horrible ways.
Yes.
And drinking,
yeah.
And that's very in our profession. That is kind of like that is a big component in the history of law enforcement. It is burying depressed state with liquid depression.
Yeah.
I want to get into leadership and how good leadership, bad leadership, and how that can affect everybody down below and actually have just a trickle-down effect on any kind of program you start, especially dealing in the mental health space. I know you can talk about it. Would you?
Yeah, sure. I guess I could point out to a lot of different examples of leadership's role. And as I mentioned, in the early part of my career versus towards the end of my career, where the confidence and the experience helped drive some of my decisions on how I handled leadership, But first and foremost, you have to have buy-in on this program with leadership. It's not going to work without them. I think you're lucky in that you have Como, who saw a successful trauma team with DEA in the years that he was with DEA. He knows that it's effective. When you go to funerals and you hear people thank the DEA for how they responded on their worst days, you know that it was a success. It's sad, but it's true, if you do it right and if you have leadership behind you. And like part of the advertising of the trauma program was like the videos that I was mentioning that shows you what the trauma team is. A lot of retired SACs or current SACs that were trauma team in their younger years, they are marketing it. They are saying that this is super important. So there's buy-in from the top down in DEA for those that have had to use it, that have been exposed to it, or were trauma team members, which is great. But it's not going to work if you don't have those bosses that believe in it.
So how long has that culture been in place with DEA? Has it always been that way as long as you've been part of peer-to-peer or the support EAP?
I think it depends on the boss. I think it's been there since the 70s. Whether the boss ran with it or understood what it was all about. As you know, ego gets in the way when somebody's telling you what to do during a critical incident sometimes. So I've had bosses resist me, and I've had to stand up to them and say, well, this is what we need. And then I've had bosses who fully supported it. When I was at our special operations division, we had a very active year. Myself and another trauma team member responded to a lot of things. And, our boss, who's kind of famous, he just left DEA as the acting administrator, Derek Maltz. He was a big, avid supporter of it. And he said, he would come down, he's a New York guy, so forgive me, New Yorkers, I'm going to use your accent, but he would come down. He'd be like, Where's Margaret? And I'd be at my little my cubicle, and he'd come over and hug me because he appreciated what I was doing. And that speaks to him as a leader. He knew how to use us after a while. But he didn't at first. We had a suicide in one city, and they brought me in too late, and some things were happening that I needed to course correct. And then he realized after that, call trauma team first and let them respond, And
that could, after a while, it takes a while for somebody to see the proof in the pudding, right? But and you say wasn't, and historically in law enforcement profession, it's not. It's come a long way to where it is now, but there's a lot of people that are set in their ways and they're stuck in the way we've always done it. Just rub dirt on it. Pack it away, bury it, and move on. You have to, life goes on no matter what happens, life goes on. But there are better ways to process it. And as a leader, I'm glad you mentioned that it has to be at the top down. Because we've had leaders here. We still have leaders here that don't necessarily, that it's not as important, and they don't look at it they look at it differently than the boss might. And we had our prior chief, the wellness unit was started under his administration. When Como comes in, he met with us and we did his episode. He's like, I am a believer. He goes, you have my support. I think that sends a message, has to send a message to everybody below him that, listen, this is going to continue, and you need to get in line, because our men and women deserve that. Their families deserve it.
You know, if you just look at the numbers and see, you know, I was studying this because I wanted to do a discussion in resilience, and I saw that one year there were more suicides in police departments across the country than on-duty deaths, and that says a lot. And for you not to believe it, to believe that we need to help or add more mental health support to people that are going through these things, then there's something wrong with you.
Well, sadly, that's the case in a lot of situations, a lot of departments and agencies.
Yeah.
It's difficult sometimes as a leader, right? And we're going to get into leadership a little bit more, but a lot of leaders think that they're already there because they know everything, when really the sign of a great leader is somebody who can still learn, right? And when you are presented with information and you have the ability to dissect it and figure it out and what the proper course is from there, that's much more than already knowing everything. I don't need somebody who already knows everything.
Right. No, you're not a leader if you already know everything, right? You're just a person who thinks you know everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. I want to get your opinion on how a toxic leadership or how unsupportive leadership can demoralize. It's like you said, it depends on the boss, because you have a lot of bosses within DEA. We have a lot of bosses within Dallas PD, but we do have a top boss. You said he had buy-in, so that theoretically should trickle down, but sometimes it does not. So can you talk about how that can just it goes against what you're trying to do? You're trying to change culture. You're trying to make a safe haven for people to ask for help and then get help and feel like they're going to be supported. Can you talk about how toxic leadership can just demoralize that? What
that can do is secondary trauma to people, right? If you don't feel supported after an incident, and I think that's where the suicides come in. If they don't show up, if they don't at least send the people who can show up, if they cannot show up, then I think we're being negligent, and I think we're creating more problems than we have to. This is not rocket science. This is very simple, and it's just caring about your people. It's a very fundamental idea to care about your people. And if there are people that are trained in providing that sort of support during these critical incidents, then you send them. It's really kind of, you don't need to go. You're not dealing with it as a leader, right? If you don't think you can, if you don't know how to do it, or maybe you've gone through something that you've built walls up and you can't handle it. And so you just kind of shut it off with all of your subordinates. Maybe that, I don't know why some people are like that. I'm giving them some grace, right? But I'm just saying that sometimes people just have never been treated that way, or they don't understand that kind of compassion. Recognize it and let the people who do it. The numbers speak for themselves.
No, I agree. I mean, it seems like a so simplistic approach, but sadly, it's not always looked at that way and treated that way.
Right.
And that's why we got to continue. That's why we got to continue this message and scream it from the mountaintops.
Right.
This is what we're trying to do.
Right. And that's something when I open my leadership discussion workshop is I talk about the trauma team, and I talk about leadership lessons that I learned while I was doing certain things. And one of them is when there was a suicide and we told the wife, and the first words out of her mouth was, it was his boss. Right? It wasn't. This guy was involved in something pretty bad and immoral. And he got caught. And so this is why. But in her mind, right, it was the boss, which told me as a young kid, wow, people go home and talk about us, right? And so the leadership lesson was, I want my people to know that even if I can't get them what they want, I'm going to do everything I can to be there for them, and that they know I have their back. And that's something I could have learned in a workshop. I didn't have to see a suicide, or have listen to a wife of someone who passed away say that. It was kind of harsh,
What are some of the things that leaders of an organization could do? The leaders of an organization, a boss is a chief, a SAC, their job is to protect the organization and to keep it running as smooth as possible. How can they do that, but also put an emphasis on caring for their mental health and of their troops and their families?
Mm-hmm. Listen, if your people aren't healthy, they're not going to get you the results that you need for your mayor or for your city manager or anything like that. So you got to take care of your people and make sure they can get the job done and do it in a healthy way. Families, like you were talking about, the alcoholism, the suicides, domestic abuse is also a big thing, right? When you're not handling your stuff, if you're not given the space to handle your stuff, these things ruin your employees. You're going to lose them, and then you're not going to be able to get your job done. So it results in people. That's one of the discussions we have in our discussions is the best leaders know that the people are what make you work. If you don't take care of them, you're not going to get the work done. You got to have a balance there.
Well, you got to understand that hard workers can make you look good. Healthy workers can make you look good and make the mission better and smoother.
Exactly. No,
that's basic. I know it seems basic, but that's sadly,
no, it isn't basic.
Yeah. Well,
it's very difficult for people, right? It is. There's egos. There's their own political aspirations, right? They all, and that sort of thing. And if you can just let that go, and actually be a servant leader, and actually look at, I got to take care of my people, and do that, then man, they will do anything for you. People will be loyal to you to the end of day, because you know what? On my worst day, you were there for me. You sent the people to support me and get me through this. I knew that this worked when I heard at funerals when they said that our response to them on their worst days made all the difference, and yes, it's easy to come together during critical, but it's the people, as we said earlier, the right people that you send out there. Some people don't know how to talk to people, and you don't really talk, by the way, you sit with them. Yeah.
No, I do want to get into, you're talking about the leadership courses you get into. I want you to talk about Wake Up, Level Up.
Mm-hmm.
Tell the listener about that and how that started,
mm-hmm.
and just kind of break it down for us.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had the luxury of sitting through one of your classes. I really would love to at some point, but can you kind of tell us how it started and what it's about?
Yeah, sure. So at the end of my career, I was a supervisor, and my former SAC, Special Agent in Charge, was Comer, and he came into my office one day and said, "I'd like to send you to this program, this leadership program in Atlanta." And I said, "Well, I don't need to go. I'm going to retire soon. I don't see myself as a leader." And he said, "You're going to go." So I went, and it had been a boutique kind of leadership program that a retired agent, John Murphy, created based on military training. He had decided there wasn't enough leadership development for DEA, so he took it on himself, and he worked on it and created this great 3-day program that is small group discussion based, which I guess is military. I wasn't in the military, but I tell people I was in the Corps, though.
Yeah,
Peace Corps.
It counts. It counts. Same.
So really that changed my life. It changed kind of certain things. I decided, I went back and I heard that Mr. Murphy was going to be retiring, and I said, we can't let this program disappear. I'd love to bring it to LA. On top of my supervisory, I had my people where I wanted them to be. I was like, I got the time, I can do this, and so I brought the program. I asked Mr. Comer at the time, and then I started doing it. Mr. Murphy came out and joined me for the first one. We got it going. And then David Downing, who's now my partner, but then he became the SAC after Mr. Comer retired. And he took me out of my position as a supervisor to do this full time. It was not a popular decision because there were not a lot of people in LA. So to to move me out of that to do this full time for the sake of the mission of DEA versus, and just leadership development. So I wound up traveling all across the states and developing facilitators because they are conversations. It's not a hierarchical instructor or student situation. And I learned a lot. And people started saying, Margaret, you need to turn this into a contracting job when you retire. And then the SAC of New York, his name is Frank Tarantino, and he loves leadership stuff. And he came out and was one of my facilitators. I did 27 of them. He came out for 17 of them. He took time out of his very busy life as a leader to come out and be one of the facilitators. And so we talk, and he says to me, why don't you make one off of team alignment? And I did. I spent a year working with leadership coaches, with organizational psychologists, putting together my thoughts on this, and running it by David because he wanted to become a facilitator. And then we created Wake Up Level Up. And so I've been doing that ever since. We're turning it into the Practice Leadership Group now, but I'm going to keep Wake Up Level Up and maybe do some free programs for youth in some libraries. That's my next idea with Wake Up Level Up, because I can do that by myself, but with David, we're bringing it around.
Where did Wake Up Level Up come from?
Me thinking a lot. And I was looking, or I don't know. Wake up to me is self-awareness, like your aha moments where you look at yourself, right? And then do better. I talk about that where know thyself kind of comes up with, back in the 5th century BC, it's one of the maxims on the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, Greece, right? Know thyself, and then I think Socrates came in and said, add to that and just say, do better, and I think that was just my more modern way of looking at that. You got to know yourself to do better. You have to do critical self-assessment and peer self-assessment. Have people ask me, all right, what am I missing about myself in order to do better, So that's where Wake Up Level Up came up. But,
great question, Kent.
Yeah.
And great answer.
Yeah. Well,
no, that was great. I know
Thank you.
Thank you. No, I want you to talk about the mission. I mean, the mission, and this is your new why. Mm-hmm. You've done all this. Started in '92. You got thrusted into one of the most historic, awful tragedies in DEA history. Mm-hmm. And you've gone down a path, and you've seen what was done right, what was done wrong, what could be done better. And now this is your new why. And it's quite impressive. It really is.
Thank you.
Margaret, I got to ask you this. So whenever, starting up anything, mm-hmm. and especially starting up something in leadership, and you're going in, you're coming in to organizations as an outsider, and yes, they could see your credentials, they could see your bios, and you get into some of these organizations, departments, or agencies. When you first started, how was it received whenever you go in and you sit down with these folks and you start putting this message out there?
So it's funny with any training. Even when I was an agent, like you resent being told to go to a training because you're busy,
of course,
right? So you usually get people in there kind of disgruntled that they even have to be there, right? But what I like about this is I try to make it, and forgive the casual term, I try to make the discussions more like family style. I want people facing each other, and I want it to be peer levels, because we rarely create a space for peers to talk about their difficulties, to talk about, trust with each other, to hold each other accountable, to know that you're a team as a leader. And I find that it's kind of cathartic for them to be able to actually do that. You work, you go home, you go out and get dope, or, whatever it is that you're supposed to do, but you really don't get a chance to learn from each other. Every once in a while, some guys have friends, right? They have a mentor or something like that. They'll pick and choose, but not everybody gets that. So this is an opportunity for them to get to know each other better and to talk about real things. We have a vulnerability piece where I have people talk about their lives and how they got to where they are today, and that gets pretty heavy. And I turn that into a leadership moment where I say, if there's that much heaviness at this moment, right now with each one of you and all the stories that you guys are sharing, then I think it would behoove you also as a leader to remember that the people that report to you also have these stories. And if you can't...
No doubt.
Yeah. So, to remember that in the forefront, that if you get impatient because they're not doing a report correct, maybe slow down and just say, hey, let me show you how to do this, slow it down.
Or if you see someone struggling, because, and I know the leaders, the higher you go, you have to look at things from a much broader perspective. But the leaders below them, they are more closer to the ground level. To be a leader, you need to be the one to not tear people down, but to lift them up. Because people are always, every one of us falls right? and struggle for over something, personal or professionally. A true leader should be there to be the one to pick them up. That is leading.
But the sad thing is, a lot of people get into a leadership position or into a managerial position where they're scared. They don't know everything, and they realize that they don't know everything. There's that doubt within themselves. And having that opportunity to sit with your peers and talk about it and realize that you're part of a leadership team, you're not working in a silo, and that we're here to support each other. That's one of the things that I love is that, hey, I needed your help and you weren't there. We've had people apologize to each other. I should have been there for you when you became this level. And I've been doing this for 30 years. I should have called you and said, hey, how can I help you? And it's just kind of creating a more positive intent instead of competition between divisions and or for us, it was like groups. It's really, there's still one mission out there. We're all working towards it. We try to break down that and have conversation. Part of our program is communication, knowing your skill set, knowing how to have that hard conversation without breaking the trust. One guy in New York, we did this for New York, and I remember him saying, I just say I love you, but I got to talk to you about this. So he started with love, and I love that because it's like, great, the guy knows you love him, so okay, he's going to give you a hard truth right now, but he knew how to say that. I was like, I'm going to use that, so I put that in my notes.
Well, there's a lot of people that a lot of leaders. To be a leader, you have to be selfless sometimes and not look at what you're doing and what outcome you're getting to be in your self-interest of how it can make you look good. Sometimes you have to, but the people below you are the ones that ultimately will make you look good with their work.
I'm going to quote David Downing, my partner, and he always says, when you become a boss, become a manager, become a leader, it is not about you anymore. It is all about the people that work for you.
So we just went through a long journey from growing up overseas, Peace Corps.
The Corps man.
The Corps man. You go to the 90s, LA, and now you're waking up and leveling up and making other leaders around the country better. But you didn't quite tell all of your story growing up.
I had mentioned earlier on that I was the daughter of an agent and that I grew up overseas. And so there's one little story that I like to share with people at the beginning of my workshops about my father getting the position to open our office in 1973 in La Paz, Bolivia, the first DEA assigned down there. And so he took his 5-year-old, his 3-year-old, and his very pregnant wife down there to a fourth world country and the highest capital in the world in La Paz. The altitude's crazy there. And during the course of that time, he arrested a man from Portland, Oregon, who was bringing cocaine bricks back to Oregon. And it really pissed off the drug trafficking organization up in Portland, Oregon. And they put a hit out on him and me. I was in kindergarten, I think. And I remember going to school with guards, Bolivian military around, and looking out the window and having them surrounding our house for this period of time that the threat was out there. I joke about a kid named Albert who used to bully me, and I thought, yeah, look at me now. I got these guys with guns coming to me to school, But then, the ambassador got us out. We split up. We had to go to two different countries, and we wound up in Panama, actually, and everything turned out, everybody was fine, but and that's just a story that I remember as a childhood. But my mom had passed away in 2020, and I had access. I inherited her journals, and I was able to read as a woman what it was like for her as a mom to have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a newborn in a fourth world country where there was no 911, and the extraordinary difficulty that she had gone through. And I even think of my dad and the guilt that he must have had bringing his family into this, and how fearful it was for her. And when I do my leadership training, I turn it around and I say, let's take the spotlight off of my family and turn it onto all of you, every person in law enforcement, and that I see and I know that every single person is sacrificing something, is carrying a darkness, shadows that are in their heart as a result of the work. And this extends to your families. They carry it, they see you, and they live with a daily fear as well. And for us not to forget that. And as leaders, that it is, if my mother was standing here today, my mother would ask you to add some words into your lives, and that is to go gently. She would ask that you go gently with yourself, because she knows that how gentle you are with yourself will come through you for the people that you influence, that work for you, that work with you, and the people that you go home to every night.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, and I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run. Up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. I'll never give up on you. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up on you.